Between 2014 and 2023, ancient DNA extracted from burial sites across the Vistula basin produced a result that Poland's foundational origin story cannot easily accommodate. The genetic signature of the earliest confirmed population in the region, the people whose graves are labeled early Slavic in textbooks, does not match what those textbooks call indigenous. The steppe admixture signal in their bones points east, toward migrations that the accepted model says should not have happened here, at this time, in this place. That result has been sitting in the published literature for years. The debate around it has barely started. What the DNA actually says about where the Polish people came from is more complicated, more destabilizing, and more human than any single origin story has managed to capture. And the most unsettling part is not what the signal shows. It is that the signal keeps appearing, in site after site, century after century, and it refuses to go away. In 2017, a collaborative research team drawing on resources from Copenhagen and Warsaw published results from skeletal remains excavated at Krakow Nowa Huta, one of the most carefully documented early medieval sites in Central Europe. The samples came from graves dated to the 5th through 7th centuries CE, the period when the first identifiably Slavic-speaking populations are believed to have settled the Vistula basin. What the haplogroup mapping returned was not what the accepted settlement model would predict. Elevated Eastern steppe admixture, R1A subclads associated with Yamnaya-related migration, a genetic signature that points toward movement, not continuity. Poland, as a genetic idea, may be younger than anyone thought. That claim deserves to be set against what it is challenging. The dominant academic framework, sometimes called the Slavic homeland hypothesis, holds that the ancestors of the Poles occupied the Odra-Vistula basin in an essentially continuous line, stretching back to at least the 2nd millennium BCE. This is not a fringe position. It is taught in Polish schools, embedded in the national historical narrative, and defended by respected institutions. The archaeological record does support continuous settlement in the region. The physical evidence of human habitation is real and well documented. What is less certain, and what the DNA is now pressing against, is the inference built on top of that evidence, that the people who arrived in the early medieval period were the same population, or descended from the same population, that had been there all along. Settlement archaeology and ethnic continuity are not the same thing. That distinction has always been present in the academic literature. What the ancient DNA work has done is make it impossible to ignore. The first direct collision between the genetic record and the continuity model lands hardest when you place the two timelines side by side. The skeletal DNA from 5th to 7th century CE burials carries a steep admixture signal that does not fit a Bronze Age autochthonous population. This is not a dry methodological dispute. Polish national identity, and more pointedly, the political use of Polish historical identity across the 19th and 20th centuries, is built on the idea that the Polish people are native to their land in the deepest possible sense. That claim was weaponized under Nazi occupation, inverted and used to justify dispossession. It was reasserted afterward as a matter of survival and dignity. The question of where the ancestors came from is not academic in Poland. It has blood in it. The graves are 1,400 years old. The debate is much older than that. None of the research that produced these results was designed to challenge origin stories. The 2014 Ancient European DNA study, led by Lazaridis and colleagues, was a population genomics project, not a revisionist history project. The Polish-Scandinavian collaborative work at Krakow Nowa Huta, Niemcha, and Bodzia from 2017 to 2020 was methodologically routine: extract, sequence, map, publish. The result emerged from the data. Nobody set out to rewrite this. That matters, because the most durable anomalies in science are the ones that weren't being looked for. The specific genetic findings are worth staying with for a moment, because they resist easy summary. The R1A haplogroup subclades found in these early medieval Polish samples are associated in the wider literature with the Yamnaya-related steppe expansion of the 3rd millennium BCE, a migration event whose genetic footprint spread westward across Europe at a speed that population geneticists are still trying to fully account for. The proportion of Near Eastern ancestry in some of the Vistula basin samples is inconsistent with what you would expect from a population that had been in place since the Bronze Age. The signal is not noise. It is consistent, it appears across multiple burial contexts, and it is measurable. Genetics doesn't care about borders drawn in the 20th century. What makes the result harder to dismiss is where it appears. This is not a single-site anomaly. The Bodzia burial ground, a Viking Age site from the 10th century, shows the steppe admixture pattern. The Krakow Roman period samples show it. The Niemcha early medieval cluster shows it. 3 separate excavation contexts, spanning roughly 5 centuries, producing the same underlying signal. Single-site results can be attributed to sampling error, preservation bias, or statistical noise. At what point does a pattern stop being coincidence? The Bodzia site deserves its own moment because it complicates the narrative in a direction that even the revisionist framework wasn't fully expecting. The individuals buried there do not share a single genetic profile. The site contains skeletal remains with ancestry patterns pointing toward Scandinavia, the Pontic steppe, and the Near East buried together in what the excavation evidence suggests was a high-status context. This is not the genetic picture of a single migrating wave. It looks like a crossroads. The elite founding population of early medieval Poland, if that is what Bodzia represents, was already mixed before Poland existed as a political or cultural concept. If the founding population was a convergence point, not a source population, then every origin story built on the idea of a single ancestral line faces a deeper problem than the steppe signal alone would suggest. The problem does not stop at Poland's borders. Similar admixture anomalies appear in ancient DNA samples from the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Ukraine. The corded ware culture, a 3rd millennium BCE steppe, influenced archaeological horizon that spread across much of Central and Northern Europe, has a genetic signature that prefigures the pattern showing up in early Slavic samples by roughly 2,000 years. The steppe admixture did not arrive with the Slavic expansion. It was already in the substrate, layered into Central European populations long before the Slavic languages emerged. That means the question the DNA is raising is not only where did the Poles come from, it is where did the Slavs come from at all. The map of original Europe keeps moving east. The case that the Viking DNA revision made this kind of question answerable is worth pausing on, because it functions as a proof of concept. Before roughly 2015, the popular and even the scholarly image of the Vikings was largely one of ethnic homogeneity, a Scandinavian population defined by place of origin and genetic continuity. Then the ancient DNA results came in. Individuals buried with Viking-era grave goods in Scandinavia carried ancestry profiles pointing toward East Asia and Southern Europe. The revision did not erase Viking identity or Scandinavian history. It deepened them. It replaced a simple story with a true one. The Vikings got their revision, the Slavs are still waiting for theirs. The criticism of the ancient DNA work on Polish origins is real, and it should be heard clearly. Polish archaeologists and some population geneticists have raised legitimate concerns. Ancient DNA samples are often small and geographically clustered. Haplogroup mapping can be overinterpreted when sample sizes don't support population-level inference. And the political sensitivity of genetic origin claims in Central Europe creates a context in which results can be read and misread in ways that serve ideological ends rather than historical understanding. These are not bad faith objections. They reflect genuine methodological caution that the field itself continues to debate. What the criticism does not do is make the steppe admixture signal disappear. The methodological concerns address interpretation, how far the inference can legitimately travel from the data. They do not address the data itself. The dating may be contested. The DNA result is not. The debate is real. So is the data. What the converging evidence suggests, and this is inference, not settled fact, is that the Slavic expansion of the 5th and 6th centuries CE was not primarily a cultural diffusion event. The slow spread of language and practice through a population already in place. It may have been, at least in part, a rapid migration. The genetic signal in the earliest Slavic period burials points toward a homeland that ancient DNA analysis now places east of where traditional archaeology assumed, somewhere in the Pontic-Caspian steppe corridor, possibly dislodged or accelerated by the Hunnic disruption of the late 4th and 5th centuries CE. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire created an enormous demographic vacuum across Central Europe. The steppe populations that moved into that space left their genetic signature in the oldest graves on Polish soil. Somewhere east of the Vistula, a population we cannot yet name became the ancestors of 300 million people. Most of the physical evidence that could answer the remaining questions is still in the ground. The burial site at Lechika in central Poland contains skeletal remains dated to the 6th century CE, whose genetic profiles do not match the surrounding population in any subsequent period. The site has not been fully excavated. Dozens of early Slavic burial grounds across Poland have never been subjected to ancient DNA analysis at all. The published results come from a small fraction of available material. The methodological infrastructure now exists to extract and sequence ancient DNA from sites that were excavated decades ago, before the technology existed. Some of those samples are sitting in storage. The cemetery at Lechika has an unexcavated eastern section. Nobody has looked there yet. The population that carried the steppe signal into the Vistula basin in the 5th and 6th centuries CE left no chronicles, no monuments with inscriptions naming them, no written account of the migration, the route, or the world they came from. What they left is a genetic signature in the oldest graves on Polish soil, a signal pointing east, past the Dnieper, past the steppe, toward a people who lived and moved and died, and became the foundation of one of the largest cultural and linguistic groups in European history, and who did all of that without leaving a single document that says who they were. If this is the kind of history that does not get told in textbooks, there is more of it, every week. We know they arrived, we know roughly when, we know what their bones carry. We still do not know who they thought they were.